Hello, JBS viewers. I'm David Harris, and I have the privilege of serving as the Vice Chair of ISGAP, the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. And I'm joined, as always, by the founder and executive director and chief visionary of ISGAP, Dr. Charles Asher Small. Hello, Charles.
Hello. Nice to be here with you.
As always. So, Charles, since we last spoke, which was about a month ago, why don't you bring us up to date on what you consider to be significant developments in the ISGAP world, and particularly, because we want to know tangibles, what's ISGAP doing in response?
Okay, so briefly, we had, you and I were in Florida together doing some speaking engagements with Misha Gelperin, our colleague. And then Natan Sharansky came to Florida, and we did a series of events with him in the community.
Mentioning that Natan is the chair of ISGAP.
Correct. So it was nice to have the vice chair, then followed by the chair in Florida. And I think the reaction of the community was really heartwarming. I think people now know about ISGAP, and they follow us on JBS and are aware of our work, especially when it comes to the Qatar issue and looking at anti-Semitism within universities. So that was, heartening to see that we're beginning to have traction in the community, thanks to Natan Sharansky and to your good work.
Charles, and again, for viewers who may be tuning in for the first time, link the Qatar issue with American higher education, please.
Okay, so if people go to our website, you'll see since the 7th of October, we've come out with 9 reports dealing with anti-Semitism within academia at the level, we could say, we're fighting anti-Semitism at the battlefield of ideas. We've been working on the illegal, undeclared funding of American universities by Qatar.
Stop for a moment. I want to stress, you said illegal and undocumented.
Correct.
You meant to say that.
I did.
Illegal and undocumented.
Right. Because according to the United States law, foreign donations to American universities have to be documented. The university, if they take a gift of more than $250,000 from a foreign entity, the university is obligated to file the donation to the federal government and state how much money came in, what was the source of the funding, and the country of origin. And what we found in our research is that many universities are not complying with U.S. law.
And please forgive me, but why? Why is the government allowing this to happen?
It's a good question. So the laws are not being enforced. I think there's more pressure now that we've sort of uncovered this scandal.
Is Congress aware of the lack of enforcement?
We're trying to make them aware. I think now that Qatar's in the news, based on our research, we found, for example, we have 2 reports on Texas A&M. We found $1.3 billion.
Billion, with a B.
Correct. That the Qatari regime entered into agreement with Texas A&M that they did not declare that money to the federal government as required by law. We also found the contract, and the contract, which was very odd, Texas A&M gave all of the intellectual property rights to Qatar. And what we have to remember is that Qatar has a bay'ah, a spiritual oath. The royal family has a spiritual oath to the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood is a reactionary social movement started in Egypt about 100 years ago that I would argue is a perversion of Islam. It's a very narrow, reactionary, hate-filled version of Islam that kind of combines it with the protocols of the Elders of Zion, European anti-Semitism, and even Nazism. And they fuse it together to form the social movement that is dedicated to the eradication of the State of Israel and the murdering of Jewish people. Qatar, which purports to be a friend of the United States and other Western countries, has a spiritual oath to follow the religious edicts.
That's the word bay'ah that you spoke about.
Yeah, it's a spiritual oath. So they follow all the religious fatwas, rulings of the Brotherhood. And Yosef Qaradawi, the spiritual head of the Muslim Brotherhood, preached throughout his life that the true believer, the true Muslim, is obligated to finish the work of Hitler. Qatar gives more money to the United States of America, and this is a country with less than 350,000 citizens. They give more money to the United States higher education than any other country in the planet, including China, Russia, our European allies, or Canada. So this is very troubling that such a small nation with such an anti-democratic, hateful ideology is funding and influencing our best universities. And we argue in our reports that this funding has shifted the discourse in our best universities' classrooms and also have influenced and inspired Students for Justice in Palestine and other student groups that are very anti-Israel and also violently anti-Semitic.
I mean, Charles, obviously I've heard this before, I'm involved with ISGAP, but even hearing you recount this, I mean, makes my blood boil. I mean, again, JBS viewers, I hope you've been listening attentively, because what Charles Small is saying is that this tiny country driven by Muslim Brotherhood ideology, which is a kind of modern day fascist ideology, anti-Western, anti-Semitic, is the single largest funder in American higher education, you're saying, and has helped change the discourse in a way that intensifies hatred of America and hatred of Jews and presumably hatred of Israel, and that existing laws which could address this issue are not being implemented.
Correct.
Why isn't this a screaming headline on every media outlet? God bless ISGAP for the work that ISGAP is doing, but this should be collective outrage on the part of every American leader, official. Why not?
Absolutely.
What's missing? What am I missing?
And to add to insult to injury, last week we came out with a report. We published a report about Cornell University, and we found nearly $10 billion with a B dollars given by Qatar to Cornell University. Much of this money is not being reported to the federal government, and this is another campus that has exploded with anti-Semitism in their classrooms and on their campus, and nothing is being done. And it's
Why?
a scandal.
Why? Is it a partisan issue? Does it divide Democrats and Republicans? What's the possible explanation, Charles?
I think it's largely greed. I think that some universities are forgetting that providing a liberal education for young Americans. These are institutions where young Americans learn to be citizens. They learn their values of what a democracy is and what citizenship is and ought to be. And I think some of these universities have traded in this sacred responsibility in our most sensitive institutions in our democracy, and they've turned themselves into greedy corporations out to make money. And I think as parents are paying a fortune to send their children to these universities so they can have a better and brighter future, we really need to call these institutions and the federal government to become responsible, because this is not only a scandal, but we can see that the miseducation of our young people in this country is steering them into twisted ideas of democracy, twisted ideas of what Israel is, and twisted ideas of what Jewish people are. And there's an explosion of anti-Semitism in scholarly, high-level scholarship and discourse, but we can see it's also being translated by students on our streets, on our bridges, in front of our synagogues, in front of our homes, that this outbreak of hatred and intimidation is a scandal.
And again, you're linking some, if not much, if not all of this, to this kind of pernicious funding driven by an ideology and a goal.
Absolutely.
Now, I know that you spent some 6 years at one of the world's most prestigious universities, Yale University, where you were invited to become the first director of an interdisciplinary center studying anti-Semitism. Can you share your experience there? Because you were on the inside in one of these marquee universities.
Right. So I think in these universities there's a lot of criticism of Israel, the existence of Israel among.
So we're not talking now about this prime minister or that prime minister.
No, the very existence.
The very fact of Israel.
Correct. So I think those of us who care about Israel and care about the rights of Jewish people in the Middle East and in this country, we always were, there was some static and there was some intellectual opposition, which is fine. Universities are supposed to be places where you can discuss and debate, and even debate intensely about ideas and politics. And, but in general we were accepted, but we were closed down without any explanation. And this led me on an odyssey. I found out about a year later by mistake that a terror financing businessman from Saudi Arabia connected to the Muslim Brotherhood was making donations to Yale University around the same time that our research center was closed down, the same time that Michael Oren, the future ambassador of the State of Israel to Washington, was asked to leave the university despite the fact that he was the most popular professor on campus, and another organization dealing with the human rights abuses of Iran that was based at Yale, they were also asked to leave.
So it wasn't just about Jews in Israel?
No. It was about criticism of, I guess, allies of some interest in this country that are connected to the Middle East.
So when you were at Yale, what was it that you touched in your research that potentially was so third railish or so incendiary? You were studying anti-Semitism, weren't you?
Correct. So I think
what could be objectionable?
Before we were asked to leave, we were told that we can study the history of anti-Semitism with a focus on Europe, but we were also very concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism in Muslim countries, in the Middle East and North Africa, the rise of reactionary social movements, the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood and other Muslim Brotherhood associated movements like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Iranian revolutionary regime. And this was the taboo. And this was the issue that was not kosher enough for the university to accept. And I think to some extent you can see this sort of pervasive view in academia in general.
So studying 19th century anti-Semitism in France or Belgium was fine.
Right.
But you touched 21st century anti-Semitism, and not just from the right, though also from the right,
Correct.
but from the left and from the jihadist world, and you were asked to leave campus.
Correct. So I think in a way, setting up a research center to focus on the history of anti-Semitism, you can say should have been seen as a victory, and we should have left it at that. But those of us who care about the future of the State of Israel, those of us who care about the state of human rights and democratic principles around the world, including the Middle East, this was sort of beyond the pale and unacceptable.
We just have a moment or two left, unfortunately, Charles, but in addition to the Follow the Money project and its relationship to Qatar and American higher education that you spoke about, that ISGAP has been driving, how do you deal with the academic climate? Do you have other strategies as well? Maybe you can just headline them for us.
So very, very quickly, I think since October the 7th, there was October the 7th, October the 9th was the Monday when this explosion of anti-Semitism happened in universities. And I think it shocked a lot of people, decent and fair-minded professors and students in universities across this country. And I think since then there's been more openness for for working with ISGAP. I'm happy to say that at Cambridge University we have a postdoctoral training program there that's expanding. We have a summer institute at Oxford University. This is our 10th year where we train professors and help them to create curriculum and courses on contemporary anti-Semitism. We have over 50 scholars who will be there this summer. We've just signed an agreement with NYU, the Brofman Center at NYU, where we're bringing our postdoctoral training program to NYU, to the United States for the first time, which is wonderful. We've been asked by the University of Miami and the University of Texas at Dallas also to work with them. So there's sort of an opening and I think an awareness that this subject matter is not only important to the Jewish people and to the State of Israel, but to democratic principles and our education, which ought to be instilling young Americans with democratic values.
So just to clarify for our JBS viewers, when you speak about postdoctoral students, what you're really talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, is young scholars, the emphasis on young toward the beginning of their career, and helping to create a pathway where they can become faculty at universities across the country and offer a truthful, honest, scholarly class and conversation about anti-Semitism.
Correct.
Rather than leaving it to others to politicize and instrumentalize it.
Correct.
Is that fair?
Yeah, so we have them for 2 years. It's a 2-year fellowship program, which I'm training the scholars. I work with the scholars directly. They have their own research projects, but they come together as a network. And if they're at Cambridge University and NYU, these are two prestigious top universities, after 2 years of training with us, there's a good chance that they'll get tenured positions at other good universities. So we're kind of building and expanding a network of scholars who take the subject matter seriously.
And who'll be on campuses hopefully for 40, 50 years. Correct. And be able to reach thousands and thousands of students.
Correct. I'll just say very quickly, we have a digital research center where we offer courses and seminars, and starting in September...
So tell our viewers, how do they find it?
And so I'll just say, starting in September, we're starting a certificate training program. So scholars, people who are interested...
People watching?
Could come to www.isgap.org.
ISGAP is ISGAP, isgap.org.
Correct.
Great. Now we're going to take a pause from this conversation, and we're going to bring in another guest, a very special guest who I think for this JBS audience needs no introduction, the legendary Abe Foxman. For 50 years or more, associated with the ADL, a leader of the Jewish people in the United States and around the world, and someone it's always important to speak with and to hear his perspectives, especially at a moment like this. Abe, welcome to the ISGAP Hour.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So the big question, let's get right to the heart of it. You know a thing or two about anti-Semitism. These are difficult times. What's your assessment of where we are as a people?
David, the most frequently asked question is a version of what you just asked. And what I'm being asked is, was I surprised? And I guess the same question would go to you. We spent a lifetime analyzing, fighting, evaluating, combating anti-Semitism. So comes October 7th and its aftermath, and this explosion of anti-Semitism, and the question is, were you surprised? And I don't know if I can speak for you, but no, I was not surprised. Because those of us who spent their adult lives dealing with the subject, we knew and we understood a long time ago that anti-Semitism is a disease without an antidote, without a vaccine, that it was, it is, and it will be. Then we won't eliminate it. And that the best we can do is contain it. And for 50 years, our institutions, other Jewish institutions, developed a strategy to contain it, to keep it under wraps. I tried to explain it. We knew it was here. We knew that it was serious. We knew all the findings, all the polling that we took. We knew that the level of anti-Semitism in this country is serious, but because of the Holocaust memory, because of coalitions, because of legislation, litigation, education, truth, media, we found ways to contain it. And so when it exploded, those of us dealing with it, as you, Charles, deal with it, wasn't a surprise because we knew it was there. It was a question, what would be the trigger mechanism? What would be that moment? And so, no, not a surprise because we knew it was there. But I will say to you that I was shocked, not surprised, but shocked by two things. The intensity of the hate. I knew it was there. I knew there was all kinds of political reasons, jealousy, whatever the reasons. The intensity of the hate is something that shocked me. And the other element that shocked me is the silence of the good people. Now, we worked very hard in the vineyards of the good people. To us, the Hillel teachings, if I'm not for myself, who will be, but if I'm only for myself, we understood it was both selfish and altruistic. I don't think any of us ever expected that when things really got bad, they'd come to defend us, to embrace it. But to the extent of nothing, to silence, I don't think we can name 5 organizations that stood up with the Jews and said this is unacceptable. And so, yeah, it's a very, very awakening moment for those who lived, I guess, in that bubble, that everything is forever. We've achieved the Golden Medina, not only here, but in Israel, and everything is fine. And I think we woke up with a reality that most of us understood is there and waiting for that moment when it may explode or maybe it won't explode.
So Abe, if this genie is out of the bottle, as you describe it, what next? Can the genie be put back in the bottle in some way, shape, or form? Is there a new reality? And if there's a new reality, does it require new strategies on the part of the Jewish community? What follows?
Okay. The new reality is, first and foremost, is more emphasis in nili mili. I think there needs to be understanding that first and foremost, we need to take care of ourselves. Yes, we'll take care of others, because once we raise the level of tolerance and respect, it also helps us. But the one major lesson is, at the end of the day, the only ones who will really care, who really can make a difference, is the Jewish people and the Jewish community. So yes, care about everything else, but first take care of yourself. I think security is an issue today. Look, we always, in our business, we always told the Jewish community, take security serious. And what would happen is, after an incident, the community would take it seriously, whether it was in Mexico and Germany, but we said take it serious every day because the potential is there. Then we do need a strategy. We do need a containment strategy. The elements of a containment strategy have changed. Anti-Semitism is the big lie. The answer to the big lie for 50 years we thought was the truth. The truth is gone. There's no truth. Many of the elements of this containment policy that we put together no longer exist. There are no coalitions. Media is not a vehicle. And then there are new elements. So we need to develop the community as the number one issue. Security, how do we protect ourselves? What's our strategy going forward? With the new reality. And the new reality is this: social media. If you were to ask me one single thing in the last 20 years that has facilitated, legitimized anti-Semitism, it's social media. It's the new superhighway, without any borders, without any accountability. That's one. And number two is, politically, whether you like it or not, Trumpism. Not Trump. Trump destroyed civility, broke taboos, and destroyed the truth. Truth was the major weapon that we used against the lie of anti-Semitism. And that's gone. So how do you build this new policy, this new strategy, without truth, without the media, with no civility, and an instrument that continues to be a superhighway for anti-Semitism? But then at the end of the day, David, it's not about them. Whether we will succeed in continuity as a people is more about us. The anti-Semitism will be there. A little worse, a little better. And look, before I go, something to bear in mind. We're being criticized. We, the organized Jewish community. Today it's a picnic. It's a free-for-all. We didn't do our job because that wouldn't have happened. We didn't eliminate it. But when you look at the last 100 years in American Jewish life, from the lynching of Leo Frank till the murders
which
in
led
Pittsburgh,
to the creation of the ADL.
Right. Apocrypha, okay, maybe.
I mean, after all these years, it's not true? Okay.
Maybe. But from the lynching of till Pittsburgh was 100 years. 3 Jews were killed in America because they were Jewish. All over the world, millions. In the pogroms in Kishinev, as I said, for 100 years, Jews were killed everywhere because they were Jewish. In America, you had Meir Kahane, and you had David Halberstam, the yeshiva bacha. That was Middle East related.
Ari Halberstam.
Ari Halberstam.
David was the journalist.
Right. And the only real anti was in Crown Heights. Was the death of Yaakov Rosenbaum. But that's pretty good in terms of what the organized Jewish community was able to maintain. But at the end of the day, a couple of years ago, I don't know if you went, there was a seminar at the White Plantation where the subject was Will Jewish Civilization Survive the Year 2050? So I went, interesting question, to learn the answer. And the organizers did some surveys of the historians Spengler and Toynbee to see if they can distill what happened to the Roman civilization, to the Greek civilization, to the Inca civilization, vis-a-vis the Jewish civilization. Why is it that they disappeared and we, the Jewish people, are still here? And for me, they came up with an answer which satisfies me, which again makes it possible for me to say the answer will depend on. And they said that the secret of Jewish survival was the difference between what happened to those civilizations. When the Roman Empire fell, no Roman got up and said, I want to be a Roman. How do I continue being a Roman? Where do I get my Roman credentials, my Roman civilization? None. When the Greek civilization perished, the empire perished, no Greek came running around saying, I want to be a Greek. How do I become a Greek? Let's Greeks get together so we can build again. Incas, we don't know. There's no history, but they're not here. The Jews, however, after every calamity, destruction of the first temple, the second temple, the Shoah, got up afterwards, brushed themselves off and said, I want to be a Jew. They wrote the Talmud, they rebuilt the temple, they rebuilt Israel. After the Shoah, I asked my father, why are you teaching me to be a Jew? Why, what's the value? And he told me the value, etc. So the test of the future is not about them. The anti-Semitism will always be there. It's about us. To what extent will we stand up and say, I want to be a Jew? Will we put on mezuzahs or take off mezuzahs? Will we wear a kippah or will we not wear a kippah? And I would say to you, David and Charles, that the last 6 months, as traumatic as it has been, because we see our kids in colleges, even in elementary schools and in high schools, suffering, feeling afraid. So it hurts. But on the other hand, the last 6 months, to me, says we're still in that mode of I want to be a Jew. Why do I say that? Look at Israel. On October 6th, Israel was a country split 50-50. It was painful to watch, and we feared that from within Israel may, God forbid, disappear in terms of it was. Look at it now. Look at it in the last 6 months. They have come together in ways we couldn't imagine. Look at the American Jewish community. Before October 6th, are they Zionists? They're not Zionists. They support Israel. They like Israel. They go to shul. They don't go to shul. Wow. Wow. We have come together. Well, one measure is money. All right, that's a measure of success. $1.4 billion going to Israel. People going back to synagogue. People struggling, this whole issue, where to send your grandchildren, what the school is, so they can be safe as Jews, so they can be Jews in this new environment. So far, I feel good about our future because I see the response to this trauma, and it is a trauma. It is something unexpected to most American Jews and Israelis. The answer is we're okay. We're going to have to continue to be okay, but at the end of the day, we will need to develop a strategy, a new strategy, and at the same time, take security seriously.
Let me, lots and lots there to pursue, and I'm sure Charles will want to pick up on some of the points. But let me dial back because one of the changing factors you spoke about, Abe, in addition to that little machine you have there in front of you on the table and the social media that it captures, you said Trumpism. And I'm guessing that there are some viewers who are going to ask, does it stop there? What about wokeism? What about Islamism, not Islam, but Islamism, jihadism, that are now also very present in the United States, particularly on college campuses? The threat on college campuses appears to be coming from that red-green alliance rather than from the Charlottesville Nick Fuentes crowd. So where do you factor in those elements into your picture?
They are serious elements. They are part of what is threatening who we are and what will be. Trumpism, however, covers the left as well, and it's not, because what Trump did is he gave a hechsher to extremism. When he broke the taboos, it wasn't only taboos for the right. It broke the taboos for the left. It gave them the hechsher as well to act in ways which before they had to worry, because in our society there's certain standards, there's certain way you talk about people, so that the lack of civility covers the gamut, the right and the left. The left has always been in. It has more chutzpah today. Islam has more chutzpah today than it's had before. So I wasn't focusing on who our enemies are. I was talking about the atmospherics. Now, this serves the extreme left. This serves Islam more than it serves the right, if you will. It gives them more credibility, more legitimacy, more highway, more distance, etc. So yeah, absolutely. Up till now, we weren't talking about where does the danger come from. Just what is the danger? The danger is anti-Semitism, and look,
And you're saying the danger is the breakdown of norms and civility and barriers.
And barriers.
Barriers.
And there are no barriers.
Taboos have been shattered.
I'll tell you, a long time ago I wrote an essay by Mark Twain. I think Mark Twain went to Europe in the 1880s and came back and wrote an essay on anti-Semitism. And he became a philo-Semite. He went to lecture about anti-Semitism. He came back and he wrote the essay and he says, wherever he went, he found anti-Semitism. Rich people, poor people, smart people, stupid people, religious people, atheists, it was anti-Semitism. He came up with an answer. We're always asked, so what's the root? And the answer, if there was one reason, if there was one cause, we can probably deal with it. And he came up with, we've always said that it is multifaceted. It serves interests. It serves the right and it serves the left. It serves religious and it serves communists and fascists and Nazis. It serves Islam and it serves atheists. So it always serves an interest. And because it metastasizes and serves interests everywhere, there is no one solution. Mark Twain said it was jealousy. He says his common denominator was jealousy, and he said it's because the Jews excel, and the Jews succeed, and the Jews are smart. And you know what? In the last 6 months, I'm starting to believe that maybe he was right. Yeah, we're right. It serves all kinds of purposes. But the intensity of the hate has to be very personal. And I see it that part of it is jealousy of Jewish success, of Jewish influence. And we in the last 20, 30 years didn't engage, we weren't worried about hubris. Our grandparents worried about hubris. Still, don't show, we said, hey, it's a new world, it's a new society, there's respect and tolerism. I think there is, and that's a very serious problem. Because an antidote to ignorance is education. We'll figure out a way how to bring back the truth. In religion, you can teach respect and tolerism. But if it's jealousy, what do? Tell your children not to succeed? And I see DEI, part of that, takes us out of the merit pool. So we're no longer players, and I don't know to what extent. I know it started out to fight bias, but it created bias against us who fought all our lives to have respect and equality for all. And so I think there is this new element which I don't know how to deal with, because I don't want to tell my children and grandchildren don't succeed. Because they're not succeeding for themselves, they're succeeding for society, for civilization, for their country. But that's a new element which we're going to have to struggle with.
You're a witness, sir.
So first of all, I feel very honored and privileged to be sitting between the two of you. And Abe, thank you for being here. You are two, great leaders of important institutions.
So if we're so great, why is there so much anti-Semitism?
Well, when you left, everything went to hell.
Thank you.
So I have two quick questions. So first of all, what would your advice be in terms of leadership? I'm sitting here between two, leaders of the Jewish community that I think were strong and unequivocal and leading major organizations successfully. And it seems to me that leadership is floundering in the United States as a whole, maybe around the world as a whole, but also I would argue in the Jewish community as well. What advice would you give to young leaders running institutions and maybe even young, Jewish people at universities who are struggling, who are on the front line of this new anti-Semitism?
David, we talk about, I go back to wanting to be a Jew. Part of the problem of wanting to be a Jew is you need to know what Jewish is. And we're paying the price of losing several generations. It's still a miracle. It's, I remember you were a pioneer in the Soviet Jewry movement. And we saw a miracle that in the Soviet Union, when they weren't taught and they weren't exposed, and yet they came back to Yiddishkeit.
At great risk to themselves,
too. At a great risk, absolutely great risk. And so there was a miracle. But here, we need a miracle because we have not taught. I'm not speaking from, I taught my children, I still taught them how to be Jewish, et cetera. Then they can reject it. But we are now reaping what we sowed. And that is, we did not train, teach, inspire with pride our children and grandchildren to be proud Jews. Now, we're a product, so we were two leaders in the Jewish community. We were products of being raised, what we went through, our parents, etc. And for a long time, that was the leadership of the Jewish community. Now you have a generation, I feel sorry for the, I have grandkids who are in a college campus. I'm okay because I know that they understand. They may feel scared, but they understand what it's all about, and they feel proud of their Jewishness, even though it's not as comfortable. I feel worse for kids on campus who don't know what it is being Jewish. Why Jewish? What do you want from me? What is it all about? And that's across the board. But here too, I will say, even here there's a miracle. Everybody was saying, about Jewish, we have created more versions of Jewishness in the last 20, 30 years than you can imagine. Institutes, this, that, new versions of a better understanding, experience, whatever. And you're finding it, in the world of anti-Semitism. There are more anti-Semitism organizations in America today than you could have imagined. They need direction. They need guidance. They need strategy. Yes, okay. But again, the response is there, the willingness is there, but there's a lot of ignorance. Not their fault. They weren't taught. They weren't given the tools. They weren't given the means to understand what it's all about and why it's important to be Jewish. So, but we're still, I think, in the midst of a miracle because I see more people putting mezuzahs on than taking off.
Nice. And then to shift gears a bit, last Saturday night, Israel was attacked by the Iranian revolutionary regime. It's a regime at its core that calls for the destruction of the state of Israel. At its core, they've taken Muslim Brotherhood ideology, which is a fusion of, I would argue, a perversion of Islam combined with European anti-Semitism and even Nazism. They attacked Israel with over 60 tons of weapons, of missiles, of cruise missiles, of ballistic missiles, and drones. Israel and a coalition of countries, the United States, the UK, France, and also Jordan and Saudi Arabia and UAE to some extent, was involved in stopping the attack, which is an amazing coalition. On the other hand, the day after, President Biden and the administration is now saying that Israel should take this as a win and leave it alone. And this reminds me of the days of the Obama administration and the Iran nuclear weapons proliferation agreement. What's your take on what Israel should do and what the response of leadership, of democratic leadership, should be in the face of this anti-Semitic, anti-democratic, sexist regime? What do you think Western leadership should do?
There's a dichotomy here. This administration, the Biden administration, came up with a historic initiative in Jewish history, which was the initiative on anti-Semitism. So in the context, for 50 years we cajoled, we pounded the door, we made the calls, please stand up, please deal with anti-Semitism. No. Comes this administration in our lifetime and comes up with an initiative which says anti-Semitism is not only your problem, it's our problem. So on one hand, it is a historic moment in fighting anti-Semitism and fighting for rights, because now the United States can go to France and Germany or whatever and say, look what you can do, etc. Now, it doesn't carry over across the board. So, because there are other interests. And so you go, what happened that Saturday night in Israel? Again, the good news is, despite the rhetoric, and the rhetoric out of Washington was not good, because the rhetoric in Washington is being run by the campaign, by the political campaign of the next election. So the rhetoric was not good. But people asked me, and I said, and I've spoken out, and I said, the Democratic administration and the Democrats are taking the Jews for granted. Some macher, some chacham, some manager of the politics have said 75% of the American Jewish community is Democratic liberal. You don't have to worry, Mr. President. Michigan is important for you. Don't worry, they got nowhere to go. They're not going to vote for Trump. They're going to vote for you. And my message is, you're wrong. You're taking us for granted. We do have options. We too can vote with our feet. Plus, there are a lot of decisions to make locally, which can make any administration's life miserable if it goes the other way. So there is this dichotomy. On one hand, listen, so people ask me, what's your bottom line? My bottom line is arms to Israel. I don't like the rhetoric. I will challenge the rhetoric. I think the rhetoric sends the worst message possible. Here's a president who flew to Israel. To embrace Israel. He's a president who said America will not permit to a repeat of World War II, because America was silent. America didn't act. America didn't respond. And here's a president who calls for $14 billion. So that's wonderful, and I think we should remember it. And what happened that night was also American leadership. But the rhetoric is distancing itself. Now, I'm not a Middle East expert. I don't know. But you want to know, if I was sitting in Iran, and I watched every single day the President of the United States distancing himself from Israel, criticizing the Prime Minister, criticizing what they're doing in the war, I would say, hey, maybe this is our moment. Maybe this is our moment. So I hope not. So there is an issue here, because listen, a lot of things that are wrong or people don't like what's happening in Israel is because of politics. Why is Bibi doing this or not doing this? Because he wants to keep his coalition, he wants to stay in government. Same thing is here. But, you know, criticism of Israel is fine, but not at a time of war. Hamas didn't go to war against Bibi Netanyahu, nor the right-wing politics, no Ben Gvir or Smart. It went against the people of Israel. So criticizing now the prime minister at a time of war, when the Israeli people, whether they like the prime minister or not, are standing and giving their lives for it, it's just cheap politics, which can have very, very serious effects.
So, following exactly on that, and it would not be the first time, but if the President of the United States invited you into the Oval Office for a couple minutes and said, Abe, we've got surging anti-Semitism, we've got these issues with Israel and the Middle East. I've always counted on you as a straight shooter. Tell me what you think. Give us a hint of what you tell President Biden today.
What I said 5 minutes ago. Continue the fight against anti-Semitism. It's important. The message is important. You took the responsibility, but implement it. Now you got to implement it.
Well, I was going to say, when you say continue...
That means you have to implement it. You have to act on it.
Well, there's a big gap between announcing it and implementing it.
That needs to be done. That needs to be done. The Jewish organizations are trying. I think the platform is there. The way to do it is there. They're not doing... I don't think they're doing what they promised.
Okay.
I don't think
So
they
that's a
can-
big ask already.
Right.
Do
And now
what
there's
you
an
set
ask-
out in May.
Now there's an ask for having somebody coordinate anti-Semitism in America. The administration has enough good people, smart people, professional people. They don't need another macher
They need a signal from the top saying,
saying you got to do it, you got to act on it.
And
the
now.
universities are a responsibility. And the university is not an issue of freedom of speech; it's freedom of action, it's behavior. We're not talking about speech; it's behavior that we're concerned about. And the schools have codes, and the codes aren't being impacted; they aren't being implemented. And many of these universities have federal funding.
Exactly.
There need to be consequences. They need to understand that it's not freedom of speech. We don't want to stop anything. They set for themselves rules of behavior. P.S. We have to remind them, if this was happening against Latinos, LGBT, African Americans, it wouldn't be a question of context. And the government would be involved. The government would be saying to universities, you have a responsibility, okay? And they're doing it. But when it comes to Jews, it's part of DEI. We're not part of that group to be protected. So that's number one. Number two, I would say, honestly, Mr. President, you can't dance on both weddings at the same time. You can't try to please the good people in Michigan and the bad people in Michigan. You just can't, and try to please the Jews in Israel. You can't. So you can't on one hand say, I support Israel and I'm strong for Israel, but you can't defend yourself. I'll give you the arms only for defense, but not if you have to defend you can't. So, and that's political expediency. And at the end of the day, I would say, Mr. President, you're going to lose on both. You're going to lose on both.
So Charles asked you earlier for your advice to Jewish organizations. I don't know if you agree with me, although I have to say I'm agreeing with a lot of what you're saying, not for the first time. But for me, there's an October 7th playbook for Jewish organizations, Abe, and there's an October 6th playbook, and they're not the same. And simply trying to continue with that October 6th and tweaking it here and there is not going to get us where we need to go, in my judgment. You may or may not agree.
No, I agree there.
But so my question becomes, if you agree, what does your October 7th playbook look like if you were sitting in the Jewish world as you were for 50 years?
So very honestly, the answer is you're absolutely right. Jewish leadership and Jewish strategy can't be October 7th or the 6th. This is an advice I'd like to give privately to the Jewish leadership and not on television. Because you and I are nageya b'davar. We have an interest. We serve the community. Some people like what we did, didn't like what it is. Our public criticism today will be misinterpreted. So if they want to hear you and me, we're ready to come. I think any advice we would give to the current Jewish leadership, what they should do as opposed to what they're doing, will be misinterpreted, and I don't think would be productive. That's all.
Yeah, I'm asking it a different way, which is, after the Second World War, the strategy was essentially, we were all in the trenches together in the Pacific, in Europe. Let's create a better vision of America. And by the 60s and 70s, as you know extremely well, we were the beneficiaries. African Americans became the beneficiaries. Women became the beneficiaries. Strategy number two, after the seizure of Eichmann in Argentina, and then a decade later, the NBC showing of Holocaust and everything that followed, and Elie Wiesel and Primo Levi and museums and monuments, memorials, the Holocaust education would become an insurance policy against the resurgence. People would understand, right? You might not like Jews, but be aware this is a slippery slope. Strategy number three was, as you said, ethnic diplomacy. We're a minority, you're a minority, we're stronger if we work together. What are your bottom line issues? Here are our bottom line issues. Strategy number four, the IRA working definition, national plans in Europe, national coordinators here, there, everywhere. All good, Abe. And there's no criticism. You and I were part of all of that and much more. The question is, what are the new frontiers? what is it that we missed, or what is it that emerged in the meantime that needs the kind of attention that it didn't get until now?
Well,
that's what I'm asking.
I think in a way,
Heaven forbid, I'm not asking about criticism.
Okay, in a different kind. I think in a way I said it. What we need to do again is
strengthen Jewish identity.
First and foremost is security, security, security. I think it's serious. It's going to be serious for a while. And again, while we can depend on funding and this, it needs to be our responsibility, like it was in Europe. And we said, look at Europe and say, hey, look at this. So that's number one. Number two is, I go back to Hillel. Number one needs to be number one. We need to worry about number one, then we can worry about number two, but it needs to be number one. And it needs to be very, very focused on number one, understanding nobody else is going to do it for us. And that changes a lot, because the orientation in the last 20, 30 years is everybody, kol hanorim, we work together, et cetera, et cetera. We spend a lot of time and energy. And look, again, I say we understood that it serves not only everybody, it serves us. Mm-hmm. But I think today needs to be for a certain amount of time. That's first and foremost. And if we accept both, then the leadership of today's Jewish community needs to come together. I'm not sure they're together. There are so many organizations fighting anti-Semitism. I'm not sure there's one table where they come together and say, okay, listen, we don't always agree with each other. We competed with each other, but we used to sit around a table, 5, 6, 7, 8 organizations, and say, what's today, what's tomorrow? And I don't think that's happening. So I think that needs to change. Because we need to plan this strategy. We need to plan it together. We need to plan it because it'll be a while before things get better. And we have to be the stimulus to get it better and not think Mashiach will come and it'll get better. So yeah, I don't see the coming together that we lived through, or our predecessors lived through. I used to go to a weekly meeting at Leo's restaurant behind the American Jewish Congress when I was carrying Ben Epstein's attaché case. But they sat every week to talk about what threatens, what's good, what can we do, what can we not do. I don't think it's happening. That needs to happen.
So your top 3 things, as I hear, Jewish security, physical security,
yeah.
Jewish identity, the strengthening of why this matters, number 2, and number 3, greater Jewish, if not unity per se, consultation and openness with each other.
Yep.
Charles, back to you. We've just got a couple of minutes, Charles, so keep that in mind, please.
Can you drill down on, when you say security, where do you think the physical threats are coming, and maybe the ideological and political threats for the community?
They're coming from everywhere. In one country it's left, one country it's right.
In the United States.
Yeah, I think it's coming from both today. We've always focused on the right, because the right has always acted violently. Now the left is acting violently. What's happening on the camera, what's happening in the streets, what's happening in front of synagogues. I live in Teaneck. Twice last month I lived under siege. And what did the siege was on a synagogue. On one synagogue because it had a real estate fair about living in Israel, and another one because of Zaka, because they were raising money to deal with dead bodies in Israel, and the town was closed. 1,000 outside protesters closed Teaneck twice. We lived, police were I couldn't get out of the house. So to me that's violence, because that goes against Jews, quad Jews, and I did a tweet. I said, can you imagine if American Jews, because they know that most Arabs and Muslims support the Palestinians, started protesting against mosques and Islamic institutions, America would go berserk. They'd be screaming and yelling. And yet here are, every single day, every single week, the George Washington Bridge is bad. The San Francisco Golden Bridge, but they're going after synagogues. They're going after Jews, quad Jews. Why? Because Jews support Israel. So that's a new dimension, and we need to take it seriously.
Abe, We're going to wrap up in a moment, but let me just ask you a kind of broader, longer-term issue. As I think many JBS viewers know, you were a hidden child during the war. You lived with a Christian family, and after the war, I think miraculously you were reunited with your birth parents. So you've seen it all, in a way, in your lifetime. What do you see going forward? I know we've touched on it, but as a kind of closing message, is there reason for hope? Is there reason for despair? The parents and grandparents who are watching this program particularly and wondering, what awaits their Jewish children and grandchildren in this country? What's your answer for them?
But, David, Golda Meir once said, Jews don't have the luxury to be pessimists. I survived the Shoah. 1.5 million Jewish children perished. I don't have the chutzpah, the arrogance, the right to be pessimistic about Jewish future. So I'm probably not the right guy to ask. So I am an optimist about the Jewish future. We have lived through worse. We have lived through worse. Much worse. And if you know Jewish history, you know how worse it was. And again, I go back and Jews got up and said, I want to be Jewish. And after the Shoah, what my family went through, my father said, I want you to be a Jew. And therefore, it was enough so that I teach my children and grandchildren to be Jewish. To me, that's a positive answer. As long as we embrace it, they're not say pride is not enough. You got to act on pride. You got to make sure that the children understand, the grandchildren understand. And I'm optimistic. Look, Israel is suffering, but we have no Israel. We have an Israel. We have an army. We have an air force. So yeah, I look at it and I worry, but on the other hand, I worry with a sense of pride. Look, Jews who watched that Shabbos of the attack from Iran, the anxiety on the hours before in the Jewish community were unbelievable. And I watched Israeli television. It was, and yet the sense of relief is unbelievable. And listen, in this crazy world, in this poll that's being taken every year, how happy are you where you are?
Right.
Israel came out number 5. People living in Israel with this Mishigas, and number 5 in the world, proud. In America, we're 22. We got issues here we have to worry about because Israel needs America. America needs Israel, but Israel needs America more. And so we have to worry about the democracy here, the strength of our democracy, of our institutions, because Israel and America are married. They need each other, but Israel, I'm going to say sadly, but that's the only friend it has. And so we need to be strong for us and for them as well.
Abe, my friend, JBS viewers, you've just been treated to the thoughts, the views, the experience of the one and only Abe Foxman. On behalf of Charles Small and myself and the ISGAP Hour, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week. And of course, in the meantime, wishing you all a meaningful, sweet, beautiful, kosher Pesach. Bye-bye.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you.